You guys know how much I live for trade season, and we have some pretty big news that should be hitting our devices pretty soon. And this is, of course, according to my favorite source, well, one of my favorite sources, and that's Shams Charania. Now, before we get to the content, just do me a favor and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Just taking a moment to leave a like on this video will send my NBA videos to a larger audience that also likes NBA videos, so they can smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. In addition to that, we are giving away multiple PlayStation 5 digital editions to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. We're going to announce the winners to the giveaway at the end of the month. Whether you're an old subscriber or a new subscriber, if you sub and hit that notification bell, you have entered for a chance to win a PS5. If you want additional entries, then make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram, because that's also a great way to get your takes featured in our content. Now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Guys, we just got some pretty interesting news in regards to one of my go-to pieces that are supposed to get traded by the trade deadline, and that is Derrick Rose. If you didn't hear about what Derrick Rose's current situation is like, I'll give you a quick little rundown. When he went to Detroit initially, during his first season with the Detroit Pistons, he performed pretty well, averaging 18 points per game, shooting 31% from three, which isn't the greatest, but also shooting 49% from the field. Rose also had a 21 PER and an offensive box plus minus of a 3.9, a defensive box plus minus of a negative 1.7 for an overall box plus minus of a 2.2, and a value over replacement player of a 1.4. Now, if you haven't been paying attention to the Detroit Pistons this year, it's an absolute mess over there. If you told me a couple of months ago that their best player was going to be Jeremy Grant, I would have looked at you and first of all, be extremely happy for Jeremy Grant because that's remarkable for him, but this is a team that has former all-stars on it like Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose. Blake Griffin was performing really well 2 years ago for the Detroit Pistons, but it seems like this year, the Detroit Pistons just completely stopped caring. It's like they have no idea what they're doing out there. At the time I'm making this video, they only have won 5 of their 22 games and are one of the worst teams in the entire league under a former NBA head coach of the year in Dwayne Casey. And it appears as though the Detroit Pistons realize that it's time to trade or sell whatever stars they have on their roster. Now, unfortunately for a player like Blake Griffin, that may prove to be a little difficult because he is under contract until the end of the 2021 to 2022 season. So unless there's a team that really wants a salary dump, I actually am going to tab Blake Griffin as a potential buyout contender, mainly because his game has fallen off so much and I can't imagine anyone trying to trade for him. However, a player like Derrick Rose, who once seemed extremely promising and just in a bad situation this year, averaging 14 points per game, 4 assists per game for a PER of 17.4 and contributing 0.4 win shares with a 33% three-point percentage and a pretty good contract, I can see him being significantly easier to move. And well, I'm not the only one that thinks that, because according to Shams Charania, the New York Knicks are engaged in talks with the Detroit Pistons to acquire Derrick Rose. Other teams are interested, with the Pistons and Rose agreeing that a trade elsewhere would be best for both sides. So who knows, by the time I upload this video, the trade could be official. You could tell how deep they are into trade talks based off of whether Derrick Rose plays tonight against the Los Angeles Lakers. If he's held out of that game versus the Los Angeles Lakers, it means that you could expect him to be traded within the next 24 hours to 48 hours. Now, in any potential trade for Derrick Rose, my top contender to leave the New York Knicks would be Dennis Smith Jr. Dennis Smith Jr. has been playing so little for the New York Knicks that he recently went and asked them to send him to the G League just so he could at least get reps in. He's averaging 9.3 minutes per game, and he has made an appearance just 3 times this year. And he's by far one of the most frustrating players that I've ever had the pleasure of following in NBA history, because he is a remarkable athlete with jump out of the gym athleticism. But he just can't put it together on the basketball court. He makes poor decisions, which is horrible because he is a point guard and is abysmal at shooting the ball. To give you an idea, last year he shot a putrid 34% from the field and 29% from three. And ever since moving on to the New York Knicks, he's contributed negative wins to his team. He has an offensive box plus minus of negative 5.2 last year and an overall box plus minus of a negative 6.1. Needless to say, he's been really bad, and the best way I could describe Dennis Smith Jr. is he is essentially Rajon Rondo without the basketball IQ or the defense. And it's really a shame because if you remember during his rookie season, LeBron James had plenty of praise about him. He even said that the Knicks messed up by not taking Dennis Smith Jr. over Frank Ntilikina. And ironically, Dennis Smith Jr. was one of the focal points of the Kristaps Porzingis trade, and he just hasn't panned out in New York. Speaking of the other two players that the Knicks could dangle, Frank Ntilikina comes to mind because he has barely played at all for the New York Knicks as well this year, averaging about 11 minutes on the court, averaging 6 points per game. He is an elite defensive player, but has no offensive game virtually. But bear in mind, Frank Ntilikina and Dennis Smith Jr. are 22 and 23 respectively, and they could also throw Kevin Knox in as well, who's played in 20 games this year and has averaged a little bit more minutes than the other two that we're mentioning, but is only averaging 6 points per game. Unfortunately, Kevin Knox has no value offensively or defensively as well, but he's 21 years old and maybe a change of scenery could help him. Maybe a change of scenery could help all three of these players. This trade would reunite Derrick Rose with Tom Thibodeau for the third time in his career, in quite possibly one of the most promising seasons for the New York Knicks in almost a decade since the Carmelo Anthony era. Now, I don't know how much this trade will improve the New York Knicks because what Derrick Rose brings to the roster is not only leadership, but a person that is very familiar with the way Tom Thibodeau likes to coach. And historically, Derrick Rose has played his best basketball for Tom Thibodeau, not only in Chicago before all of his injuries, but even more recently in Minnesota. Once he reunited with Tom Thibodeau, he experienced a bit of a career resurgence. Now, Derrick Rose did play for the New York Knicks for 1 year, but that was once the Chicago Bulls decided to move on from him, and for the most part, he's been a very solid player with the ability to kind of turn back the clock here and there once in a very while. Needless to say, I believe this move is more about establishing a culture in New York as opposed to really trying to win a championship. If the New York Knicks make it to the playoffs on the back of Julius Randle, Derrick Rose, and RJ Barrett, then this trade will be much more worth it. Meanwhile, the Detroit Pistons should be trying to figure out what young players they'd like to keep for the future and what young players they could expect to sever ties with, because clearly they're trending towards Cade Cunningham territory, and it's best for them to sell their best assets just to prepare for a full-scale rebuild. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this prospective trade. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.